Good morning. This is Faith in Our Hometown, brought to you as a community service and sponsored by Mercy Hospital, Joplin. And now, here's your host, Father Jay Friedel.
Good morning. I hope you're having a wonderful Sunday morning. Welcome to Faith in Our Hometown. Maybe you're joining us for the first time. Maybe you've been watching us for a long time. But either way, welcome. My guest this morning is Randy Garris. Randy, we have not had you on in ages. You're one of my most fun people to have conversations with on this show, but you've been so busy this last year, we haven't been able to have you back. So thanks for coming back.
Well, thanks. I thought you'd actually raised your standards, is what I thought you'd done. But
No, we haven't raised our standards at all.
Okay, all right. Well, I'm back
Consider
apparently.
the host of the show.
Okay.
And how can you raise your standards too high without losing all of the people you want to talk to? So at any rate, one of the things we're going to be talking about this morning is that there's a lot of doom and gloom when it comes to talk about religion in the newspapers today. You can read it all over the place that religion's in a decline, religion's in a downfall, or even a free fall if you listen to some people. And some of us wonder whether that's the case. So we're going to be back to talk about whether or not religion's in decline or not right after this Mercy Minute. So stay tuned and stick with us.
The different bariatric surgical options here at Mercy Joplin includes laparoscopic Roux-en-Y gastric bypass, laparoscopic sleeve gastrectomy, and laparoscopic lap band placement. In addition, we also offer revisional laparoscopic surgeries for those patients that have had previous bariatric procedures but have had failures. The surgical procedure of choice will vary with different individuals, and so that's why our team will work with the patient on an individual basis to determine which procedure is the best fit for them. All three of the bariatric procedures that we offer here at Mercy Joplin have a long track record of proven safety and efficacy. The best procedure for the individual has to be a decision to be decided between the patient and the physician.
And so, welcome back, Randy. My guest this morning, Mr. Reverend Randy Garris, who's at Ozark Christian College, is on the faculty out there, working with ministry students and helping them make that great transition from theory to the real world, and so that's been tying you up a lot. But I'm glad you're here this morning. Let's talk about this issue of what we read about a lot in the press, that religion's in decline, and all of us who work in religion ought to be in fear and trembling because we're gonna have to just shutter our doors or our windows, in the days to come. What do you think about that? Do you think religion's in free fall, or what's the deal?
Oh, I think it's impossible for people to stop asking the big questions of life. Now, they may decide at some point in time that they think the more traditional answers aren't the right ones, but nobody stops looking. In fact, I was reading a survey today about millennials, and it simply said that millennials, in the top 3 issues of every millennial ever visit with, is something on the internal part of them to answer the big questions.
Right.
So when somebody says that this generation isn't interested in the big questions, that's just not true.
I agree. I think that they propose a bigger challenge to some of us who've become very comfortable in the way that we go about some of our practices, or some of us who practice religion, because I think that they're going to want to find inner authenticity rather than just being able to settle for same old. But I think that they're hungry. All of my work with students says the same thing. I mean, it bears out, only anecdotally, not so much in terms of a poll or anything, but they're hungry. They want the answers to the big questions, and I think that if we offer them the space to be able to do that, and they feel free to come into that space, I think we're far from free fall. I think we're actually just going to have to kind of up our game a little bit in terms of the way we engage it.
In particular, there's no doubt that now I'm going to narrow this down slightly.
Okay.
There's no doubt that the church in America and the church in the Western world is under massive change. I think anybody who would say that, I'm again keeping this a little narrower, anybody who would say the church in America is in free fall or in demise probably is inaccurate. I clearly say it's in major change. I would clearly say that the culture is in massive change. There used to be a sort of a pro-church culture, and that culture's that has left. The church that is going to exist is going to exist in much more of an anti-church culture. But I think the question of whether the church itself is going to be strong and well, I don't have any question on that. G.K. Chesterton, obviously from the background you come from, but
Yeah.
G.K. Chesterton says that there's been a series of revolutions with Christianity, and Christianity has died many times, died and buried, and then he uses this last part, but he said there seems to be a God who knows his way out of a tomb. And so I think the question of whether the church will be here is, quite frankly, even all research says the church is actually strong. What's actually changing is the positive environment that was around the church.
Right, and like I say, I know that in our own denomination, our own bishops sometimes get worried because they, Catholics, we like to tout our horn for years. We're the largest denomination, and of course, we're monolithic, but we're the largest religious denomination in the United States. And now some of the other teaching says to us that if we actually had all the people back that have somehow become a little disenchanted or non-practicing or did some of that stuff, we'd have the two largest. Now that's a little, that's a
attenders
little bit,
and non-attenders.
right. Yes, the attenders and the practicing and non-practicing Catholics would be the two largest denominations. And so, our bishops worry about that because they're just like, well, we got to run this place and we got to, what's happening to our people? And so for me, of course, and I think that, and I guess I've been on the leading edge of some of this because I've been dealing with students for the last 25 years. This doesn't seem anything new to me because, for years when they come to campus, if you don't figure out ways to engage them, they vote with their feet, and so the challenge has always been, how do we keep them engaged? And, because I still believe in what we've got. I still believe in what we do. I still believe in what we believe. But the question is, how do we engage a different generation that's just not going to swallow it hook, line, and sinker?
I don't know that, anytime you use metaphors, you can certainly mislead people off metaphors and they don't always communicate as well as you want. But in essence, there's kind of been three churches in the United States. One is just kind of a cultural church. That is that you're more likely to be voted mayor of a city if you are part of a church. You are more likely to be put on the school board because it was a cultural church. The cultural church, no doubt about it, we are a secular society. That cultural church has fallen away. In fact, it's far less likely to get voted in as mayor of a city if you attend a church now, because the culture sees us suspicious.
And Joplin probably is a little not on that
leading edge. A little further behind, but it's much
not
what you
far.
think.
Yeah, and I agree with that. But I'm just saying, where the culture in which we live still has a tendency to have a little bit of a kind disposition toward religion.
And if I'm real honest about it, quite frankly, the Church of Christ followers, which would, in my little sequence, would be the third church. There's kind of a middle one I'll talk about in a second too. But the Church of Jesus that says, "Come die with me, come follow me." That church doesn't always thrive in prosperity. It doesn't always thrive when everybody's applauding. In fact,
That's
the message of "come and die with me" and "come and follow me" doesn't work well when you actually follow for the personal perks.
Right.
So the second church is kind of that congregational church that it's a cultural church, a congregational church. They attend a church much more. May not attend because I'm a great Christ follower, but I tend because I believe this. But it's a bit of a lukewarm faith. Well, the cultural church and that congregational church, those are dropping away. I don't think the third one is leaving very well. The third one, the real Christ followers, I don't think you're seeing much shake there.
Well, and again, I think that there is, we've discovered this obviously, and in parts of the world, that are being oppressed. The faith always rises and sustains. Wherever we've been oppressed, the church rises up. And part of the reason of that is because you really wind up living out that death and resurrection in very real and true ways. So you come very quickly to figure out what you believe in once you've experienced the new life in the midst of the death. And I think that when we're in a culture that doesn't experience much of that, I think that that's one of the reasons why Europe was doing that. Although it's interesting, again, some of the studies in Europe show that they're a little bit starting to pick up again, because their desire for connecting to some of the quote older ways seems to be picking
You're
up a little.
still looking for answers.
Yep.
I'm reminded of the words of Jesus to disciples as all the crowd all left. He said, "Are you going to leave me too?" And their response is, "Where else can we go?
Well,
you alone have the words of life."
I love Peter's response. I've really gotten really much closer to Peter since I've come to Joplin, because it's the first time I've been at a church named for him, okay? And I love that line of Peter's, because it's almost like he's saying, we don't understand it and we don't necessarily even like it either, but we've really come to believe in you.
That's right.
We've come to believe in you.
Yep.
And because we believe in you, okay.
Yeah.
So no, we're not leaving. We're stuck.
Yeah. And not only stuck, but you look at his plowing through that, and I'm going to stand here, and I'm not moving.
Right.
Yeah.
And even when he moved a little bit, there was still a space for him, which is even even better. It's like, okay, you don't even have to be perfect to do the following. You just gotta stay with it.
Yeah.
You just gotta be tenacious enough to just not quit. And stay with it, which again, that to me, I've really developed a much more, we would call a Petrine spirituality, since I've become pastor of St. Peter's here in Joplin, because I just, when those stories come up, it's just kind of like, well, where do we stand with that whole thing? He was, and made out to be such a bumbling fool in the scriptures. And those are the people that were writing the story to make other people believe. I know there had to be some method to that madness.
Right.
I love it. I love it, love it, love it. So how do we reach people in this day and age? How do we do some of that? How do we adjust to what they need today? What do they need?
Well, I'm going to cut us to the chase as clearly as I know, is that when the church is mixed in with what I'm going to call Christendom, kind of that cultural Christianity and kind of that congregational, when real Christianity is mixed in, quite frankly, that's confusing for everybody, and the church itself's a little fat and out of shape and those sort of things. I'm a kingdom optimist. I don't mind telling you that when you actually have to stand up and say, this is not popular, but I'm hanging on to Christ because I believe this is true, and when the applause in the stands goes away, it leaves an authentic church, and the authentic church is far more effective than the popular, applauded, this squishy middle, as somebody called it, church. So I'm a kingdom optimist. I believe that my grandchildren, in many ways, will have a better, more faithful church than I grew up in, because it's not being applauded. It's not being fed, I guess, a false power. All it has is Jesus, and I think that church will discover Jesus is enough.
Yeah. We, in the Catholic way of looking at things, both John Paul II, which was 2 popes ago, and Benedict, which was 1 pope ago, had this thing where they would just talk about, especially Benedict talked about that the church might have to be a little leaner. Yeah. And we may have to learn how to get used to that, in some ways. Now, I'm not in terms, I figure when it comes to evangelical pruning, I'm going to let Jesus be the one that does the pruning, rather than me be the one, because I don't want to start pushing people off the vine that don't happen to agree with me. But I do think there's something there. There's a challenge there about saying how, when we get down to not being the one in charge anymore, do we still find our witness value? We're going to come right back. We're talking a little bit about whether or not the church is in decline, and Randy and I both are coming down on the spot where we don't think so. But we're going to talk a little bit more about how we do some of that, engage some of it right after this quick break. This is Faith in Our Hometown. So don't go away. Don't touch that dial, as they used to say, but probably now it's a button or something like that. But we'll be right back.
You're watching Faith in Our Hometown on KSN TV, brought to you as a community service and sponsored by Mercy Hospital, Joplin.
So again, thanks for sticking with us. My guest again this morning, Randy Garris from Ozark Christian College. Randy, over the break you said there was a story that you were thinking of.
Oh, your comment a minute ago about how do you prune the church? I mean, who does that? Okay.
Oh, I think only Jesus safely.
And I agree with you. That and also when it is not applauded and popular in a culture. I was in Southeast Asia. I was in a very antagonistic country to anything Christian. And I was asked to do some teaching from the book of Daniel to a group of people to teach them what's it like and how do you live in a culture that is not of your faith and not of your belief and in fact antagonistic, and how do you live there like Daniel lived in Babylon. So I'm teaching this. Well, there's a lady sitting directly in front of me that had just gotten out of an extended set of months in a re-education camp. She's a mom, she's got 2 little children, and she had been arrested because she had been found talking about the Bible with a neighbor. And so they put her in, and every day she took a sledgehammer and rake, and she worked on the road. That's all she did, was crush rocks and rake. Now again, there were probably 50 I'm sitting there with teaching this to, and multiples had been there. Well, I asked the woman, I said, that re-education camp and those many months of doing that, what did it do to you? And she said, oh, it was wonderful. She said it was wonderful. She said, because there were a lot of people she said that were Christian in name only, but they didn't live it. She said it took good persecution to kind of cleanse everything. And she said a little persecution causes people who are not serious to drift and run away. And she said it only left people who really wanted to stand for Christ. Well, in some crazy way, I think I get that. As a junior high kid, man, to be a part of the church, because that was kind of where the cool kids hung out, that was one thing. But to be a part of the church as an adult, when nobody's applauding, I think you have to decide whether or not I think this is the truth. And in genuine Christianity, I think it stands a whole lot better than that, as I said a minute ago, squishy middle or that cultural politics kinds of nonsense. In fact, when we say, even the question, is the church in trouble? That's very much a white middle-class American question.
It's true.
Because the truth is Christianity is exploding all over the world. It's just in Africa and Asia and everywhere else. It's only the white middle class in America that has played with power in some of the wrong ways. They're really the only ones asking that question.
Yeah. And, I think that, unfortunately, anybody who has been through the death side of the death and resurrection cycle and has come out the other side comes out it absolutely completely transformed.
Yes.
And that's what makes the next time something tough comes along, they'll be like, I lived through it before.
Yeah.
I'll live through it again. It's going to be okay.
The church that my grandchildren will be in, I don't think will be near as building centered. I don't think it'll be near as business looking. I think the church will be far more a set of worshipers that have thrown aside about everything to say, I want to follow Christ. I think they will love their neighbors. I think they will have a certain number of, I'm speaking metaphorically probably, but bruises, but it's okay. It's worth that. Yeah. And I think a more authentic church that meets in smaller settings with probably that more cleansing, a little bit of fire. Abraham Lincoln one time said a little hanging is probably good for everybody. And there's a sense in which a little bit of hanging probably makes me decide, am I in or am I out? And I think that church will be fine. On just a straight statistical basis, there's a guy who worked for Lifeway for many, many years doing surveys. He said there's no serious researcher, none, that say that the authentic, genuine, committed Christ followers have actually very declined, almost no decline. What has declined is that cultural acceptance, and that's what we're feeling.
Yeah. And again, I think that, let's face it, Jesus said the world is supposed to hate you a little. Yeah. If we're not getting any pushback, if we don't get any pushback, well, what am I preaching about?
Yeah.
I mean, nobody wants to. I mean, and I'm not even one of those that's hired by my congregation. Okay. But nobody likes to upset their congregation. But if I don't upset them once in a while and don't challenge the status quo, what really right have I got to be a preacher? Or what right have we got to be Christians, if you will? And I think that that's really probably true of many other denominations as well that aren't Christian, but that want things to be better in the world. That believe that there's that somehow things are not as good as they could be. How do we be that leaven in the lump? How do we get that to happen, especially for our young people? What do you think are some of the things that they're looking for? And I know you're not going to go for a particular style of worship or any of those things.
And all
what do you think they're looking
all
for?
those are red herrings.
Oh, I know.
Honestly, it doesn't have to do with. It has to do with authenticity. The one thing every generation beneath in age, the one behind it, they can see the holes in hypocrisy.
Sure.
We don't see ourselves well, quite frankly. my own holes in my own life, my own children, and those who love me that are younger, they see that better. Now they've got their own that their children are going to see.
Sure.
But
none of us get by without a few bruises.
But I spend all of my day and half of my night. In fact, I will do that. It doesn't matter what day of the week you choose with college age kids who want to talk about the big things of life, and they want to know, are there answers? Are the answers out there, or do they have to find them inside themselves? They want to know, and a Christianity that will wrestle with those things and be authentic and have a real community, not a faux community, not a fake one.
Yeah.
You can talk with people and your neighbors and wrestle with these things and flourish. This Christianity is not being run away from by millennials because they don't like the truth they wrestle with. They run away from it because they don't like some of the people who profess it.
Right.
It has nothing to do, so to speak, with Christ and even Christian doctrine. It has to do with, if those are the cousins I have to have in my family, I don't like those cousins. And I think they're actually running from the cultural church. I think they're actually running even from that congregational church, but I don't think they're running from Christ.
Yeah. Well, you quoted Chesterton earlier. I'll give you one of my favorite Chesterton quotes here. And there he says, my biggest argument against Catholicism is Catholics.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a great quote, and it's the truth, because I agree with you. I think that for me, it's how do we get through the noise of this current milieu? Because every milieu has its noise.
Yeah.
How do we get through the noise of this particular milieu, and help them to somehow wade through it enough that they can get to what I would consider the mystical heart at the bottom of all religion, at the bottom of all faith.
Yeah.
It's that what's really real. How do I name it? How do I stay immersed in it? How do I live in the give and take that it entails? And again, for the Christian, that's centered in the person of Jesus.
Right.
But again, the person of Jesus is centered in the life of the Trinity. Mm-hmm. And that we've got a God who is relationship, and there's that give and that take in that relationship, and then that give and that take with us in terms of that. And it's just, to me, it's how do we help ourselves and the next generation to somehow get to that mystical heart of that's at the core of what we believe.
When I think about even who'd be watching this morning, and it comes down to everybody has children and grandchildren they love. You don't start slapping answers to something until you've wrestled with the very questions they're asking. And if you have enough honesty to wrestle with the questions, the answers are clung to if you'll wrestle with the questions. Don't start throwing bumper stickers and phrases and pet answers. It's wrestling with the questions. Now, I do think not every answer to the questions are right.
Oh yeah.
But I settled on these answers for my life, and I have no hesitation saying to a young millennial or anybody else, I think you're going to find that this may be what you're looking for, but you got to wrestle with a question, and that dogmatism of I won't wrestle with a question, that'll kill you.
Yeah.
That'll kill you.
Well, as I've said to him, for years up until July, the last 11 years I was training the new priests for our diocese. Mm-hmm. And I got a lot more spare time on my hands now, but But having done that, sometimes they'll come in and they'll get, very critical of, the way the church was or something like that. And I just kind of smile and I'll sit back and I'll say, don't worry about it. You're about ready. Once you get in these chairs and you're going to be doing this, you're going to have your chance to screw it up just the same way we did.
That's exactly right.
Don't worry about a thing.
Yeah.
You may make a different set of mistakes, but I guarantee you'll make mistakes.
Yeah.
But the core still has to stay. So in other words, sometimes the more things change, the more they stay the same. And again, that's one of those things that gives me, reason to believe that no, we're not in serious trouble, because people still need the church.
They're still asking the same questions.
Yeah.
Still asking the same question. I don't know who has the illustration of the tightrope walker, but a tightrope walker, I don't care how skilled he is, has to have two things anchored. One end of the rope where he came from and one end where he's going. And if those aren't anchored solid, I don't care how much skill is, he can't do it.
He's not going to be able to make it one side
The
or
biggest
the other.
question is, where did I come from? Am I loved?
Yeah.
Where am I going? What happens? Am I just a fern needle that dies when I get done? And those questions, and I came to the conclusion from my own life that Christ answered that for me.
Sure.
I think those are still the issues.
Well, I've been talking with Randy Garris this morning about, obviously very passionately, about what we do, how we preach, how we live life. And that's one of the reasons you're fun to talk to, because I find you a kindred spirit in this adventure. But we've been talking about how we anchor ourselves in the world today, the same way that we've tried to do it through this years. So we're going to be right back after this Mercy Minute. Don't go away.
The SANE program, or Sexual Assault Nurse Examiner program, is a program established to provide a coordinated, specialized care to patients or women or men who've been the victim of sexual assault.
The SANE program is really designed to be a collaborative community response to sexual assault.
It's really important to make sure that it's not just the report or the forensic, but they get all of the testing that might be needed for their health.
It's also important to know that you don't need to know if you want to press charges or not. We don't get law enforcement involved unless you request it.
I just want to express to the victim that it is never your fault. You always have the right to say no, and that it's your body. So if you say yes one time, it doesn't mean every time.
I think it's important that sexual assault victims remember they've been victims of a crime, and crime victims do not pay for those services.
Well, my guest this morning has been Randy Garris from OCC. Randy, it's always good to talk with you. We mentioned the fact that we might not have necessarily solved anything, but we've meandered at it pretty well for a half an hour. I was just sharing with you during the break that I've got this large crowd of young families right now at St. Peter's. And I love the fact that they are so alive, because what they really want is, now that they're having their babies and they're coming fast and furious, and I love it. Mm-hmm. We're having a ball. But as that happens, they want to see that flame of faith ignite in their children. Mm-hmm. And their children are not even able to put words to anything at this point in time, but they are so excited about life and about faith and about Christ and about their Catholic faith, and I see that as such a true blessing. That's what we've been talking about all morning, is how do we continue to light the faith for a next generation. Join us next week for Faith in Our Hometown, and keep the faith out there. Enjoy.
Thanks for watching. Faith in Our Hometown can be seen Sunday mornings at 6:30 and 9 a.m. on KSN. Brought to you as a community service and sponsored by Mercy Hospital, Joplin.